All right. Well, we are officially a minute past the hour, and to my word, we're going to go ahead and kick things off. This will be a recorded session, so if you miss anything, don't worry. We'll make sure to share with you following today's session. Welcome to our latest webinar. Today, we're going to talk about partnership and how the expertise together bring ServiceNow voice and AI to help build specifically a managed services model on the ServiceNow platform. So again, thank you for joining. We're going to have a relatively quick session. We try and keep these to about 30 minutes or so. Some housekeeping rules, just as a quick reminder. Some of what we might cover today could be forward-looking in nature. Simply ask that you take that in consideration as you witness today's session. My name is Guillaume. For those of you who don't know me, I am the ServiceNow practice lead here at 3CLogic, and it is my pleasure to welcome our fellow partner, Adam Mason, who is the Vice President of Strategy at Glidefast, and who's going to help us with today's topic. Adam, good to have you.
Thanks for having me, G. Glad to be here. Exciting topic, an exciting personal journey here for us at Glidefast.
Yeah. Well, we have an exciting agenda, right? So we're going to try and cover a lot in a short amount of time. We're going to take a look at sort of the broad state of the union, including the state of managed services and in regards to that industry specifically. We're going to talk about the pros and cons of configuration over customization. We're going to try and relate that all back to how does that then come into play when you look at ServiceNow together with AI and together, of course, with voice and contact center. And then we have a case study, which Adam is going to lead to sort of bring it all together before we close out with a key or a couple key takeaways. All right, so with that, let's dive in. So as I promised, we wanted to kickstart things just to sort of level set, in terms of why are we having this conversation today? What are some of the broad stroke tectonic shifts and trends that are sort of affecting this specific market and managed services specifically? And the first is really there's an interesting shift that's taking place that started but is progressing both this year and we anticipate in the years to follow, which is a lot of enterprise organizations have decided really to shift the majority of their operations and their workspace predominantly towards the CRMs and the systems of records that they use or plan to use. And that's an interesting shift because in the past, there was sort of an even split between organizations that were predominantly operating out of their contact center solution versus those that were predominantly working out of their CRM. But as we move forward, there is clearly now a majority vote in favor of the CRM. And that's important when we talk about where the ServiceNow fit within the context of today's discussion. At the same time, there's this move to more of a hybrid services model. So obviously today we're going to talk about managed services, and how you can build a managed services, offering a model on ServiceNow. But when you talk to executives, the vast majority have started to really selectively insource specific functions of their operations. And the reason being is they're trying to sort of, really move away from a total outsourcing model towards one that's a little bit more multidimensional, one that allows them to sort of keep the brains of the operation, right? The platform, the strategy, the AI governance, and so forth, that they want to now maintain in-house, and then really move the remaining functions, the specialization to managed services. And that deals with the platform architecture, integrations, management of those integrations, and so forth. And that's why, of course, we've got our partner and counterpart, Adam, to speak to that in today's session. Another big trend that I think is quite relevant to bring up is that voice is becoming a core pillar when it comes to customer experience. And I say becoming. Voice has always been a dominant form of communication, a dominant channel, but it's always historically been that channel that we all love to hate, right? Let's be honest. When we call organizations, it's not because we don't have anything else to do. It's because very often it's reached that point of escalation where we feel the need to call in because digital channels and perhaps other forms of engagements have failed us. The interesting thing is with the introduction of AI, voice has taken on a whole new meaning, a whole new role. In fact, majority of companies expect that AI is going to help it, well, not help, but is going to have a downstream effect that leads to the increase in the amount of voice traffic that organizations have to source and address. And that's where managed services, of course, becomes very interesting in the scope of today's discussion. And last but not least, data. Let's be honest, AI, which is the hot topic. It was the hot topic last year. It continues to be so entering this year. AI is only as good as the data it has access to. But again, a lot of organizations, a lot of customer service leaders will admit that the data silos that exist today in most enterprises are the number one barrier preventing AI from really living up to some of the expectations that we have today, right? So that's the general state of the market. Those are some of the large sort of trends that are in play. But let me turn it over to Adam because Adam, when we take those trends and we talk about, what are some of the shifts that are happening in managed services, walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Guillaume. Honestly, what people were really looking at were, hey, we have to have a great customer experience and have great people doing that. And then, of course, there was migrating to the cloud. We've pretty much done most of the migrations to the cloud. Sure, there's some data centers out there, but most people are in the cloud predominantly. And that also came with a lot of reactive support, which we're trying to be counteract with different solutions. And overall, when we entered into a managed services space, we looked at generalists, right? People that just had kind of a limited skill set to cover all the bases, right? And so that was kind of the approach. What that's really evolved into here is several different things, right? So you've got, as Guillaume pointed out, the AI part of this, right? And we're moving from a people-led type solution into more of an AI first model. And so that's really challenging pricing, that's challenging structure, that's challenging how people observe outcomes from their partnerships with managed services providers. And so that's something that we're looking at personally and looking at ways that we could be more outcome aligned, right? And the ways that we can support the enterprise because it's going to go beyond just, the standard, hey, somebody picks up the phone and whatever, right? They want actual results, right? They want to use AI to speed up average handle times or actually decrease average handle times, right? They want to do things to like improve security. They want to do things to improve resolution rates, right? So that is one of the big things that we're shifting here is these AI first models in the managed services space. Again, the second one, we're past cloud migration. Now we really need to use our intelligence from moving to the cloud. It's all accessible, or we bought all these licenses and we can do all these things, but we haven't done it yet. So the concept of cloud waste or shelfware is really out there. And a lot of times we're seeing the shift where managed services is helping people get more value out of what they already have, right? Or to build more value into the host of things that they have. And so that's a big topic area that we see within managed services. The third one is really around proactive, right? Self-healing is the right way to look at that. We've been doing things, especially in ServiceNow, like with AI ops. So trying to do things where, hey, this happens and AI and other workflows just fire off and they resolve it. And we tell the humans that, hey, now it's fixed, right? And so we're going to continue in that trend. That's been around for several years, but I think that's really starting to become more of an expectation than a nice to have, or what do we have to do that, or maybe that's a specialized use case. That's more realistically something that is across the board. And then finally is the, hey, generalists, that's not really working for us anymore. And we really want either platform specific or industry specific people providing resources via the MSPs, right? And so that's what we're looking at. Like we're very much focused on having the best ServiceNow experience possible. Some other MSPs are out there saying, hey, we want to have the best finance experience possible or the best manufacturing service possible, right? And so we're seeing a shift to these specialized areas, either across platforms or across industry or a combination of the two. So, Guillaume, that's what we're seeing from a managed services layer. What are you actually seeing from the engagement layer on your side?
Well, so sorry, seem to have a call coming in. So the reality is, on the engagement side, there's some, as I alluded to earlier, there's some pretty significant shifts that are happening where voice is sort of coming back into focus. Again, it's always been operating in the background, right? It is also to this day, despite the proliferation of digital channels, the most effective form of communication at solving both simple as well as complex use cases. But when you talk about managed services, it's also the most expensive form of service, right? because typically when you have people answering the phone, those, that headcount and so forth adds to your operating cost model. So when you look at managed services, there's always been this desire to try and mitigate calls, to reduce the need for people to call in, and ideally push them towards digital channels. But with the proliferation of AI, and it's happening fast, voice has taken on a whole new opportunity here to affect customer experiences. So in the past, you have deterministic IVRs, right? Press one, press two, right? Pre-scripted workflows that had really no flexibility around the edges. And now you're moving more towards from multi-channel into more intelligent self-service, where AI and the ability to create non-deterministic conversational experiences is really sort of making voice, for lack of a better term, sexy again, but also capable. Capable in the terms of allowing voice to live up to the types of experiences that you and I have always wanted, right? Voice is still the most effective means of communication. You can share tone, sentiment. When it's a complex use case, it's a lot easier to express the problem than it is to try and type it in an email or in a chat and things of that nature. And if you look at some of the research, the types of use cases, whether it's managed services or just traditional customer support, the types of use cases that organizations are fielding are actually increasing in their complexity. And so that's part of the reason you're seeing an increase in voice traffic, but it's also an opportunity. So when you think about voice, people are thinking about real-time engagements. They're talking about using AI to summarize those conversations. They're talking about reduction in cost per transaction, per interaction. How can you allow voice to be part of your managed services, modeling, if you will, and still allow for a faster escalation paths, right? I know I recently called an airline, and one of the pleasant surprises is I got through to someone in 30 seconds and they were able to solve my issue in 30 seconds. And that experience for me was a positive one, right? But it was also a very effective one for the organization because it wasn't a 10-minute call. And so, how can you use all that and integrate these voice to case or voice to ticket intelligence to try and really allow voice to be optimized and really included into the ServiceNow work streams and automation workflows that you're building on a platform like that of ServiceNow? That's, of course, part of the collaboration that 3CLogic and Glidefast have had. But Adam, what are your thoughts?
So I think the big one, and you really touched on this, is that it's not a channel strategy anymore, right?
Yeah.
It's an AI strategy. And we just used to look at voices like this is one of the inbounds, right? But now it's probably one of the best inbounds for actually getting an AI response, right? One of the best channels you can work with. And the challenge, honestly, is back to something else that you alluded to, which is silos, right? And if you can't get that voice to be more or less native within the platform that you're using to support people, and for us, it's ServiceNow, then you're kind of working with a blindfold on for your AI. It's like they just don't know about what's happening over there. Sure, you could have some AI front end stuff on that, but it accessing some of that other data that's readily available to it is just a very different beast. And so I think we have this unique opportunity in front of us, right? Where we have context, which context is the most important possible thing for AI. It is fuel for AI. And I think if you really want to unlock the value of what you probably already invested in or what you're looking to invest in, and you want to amp that up with AI, you have to think about the context. And ServiceNow, for us, has massive amounts of context. People are all doing work together in there. We have all these united workflows. We have data passing through different integrations coming into the system, going out of the system, right? So there's all this context that exists in ServiceNow natively. Same thing would happen with an engagement layer with 3CLogic, right? We have all this, all this other context, all the sentiment, all the words that we're capturing here, all the conversation, all the how are they talking about it that's there. And if you can unify those two things and have them converge in platform, that really gives you so much more power than what you had before, right? And that's what we're looking at as, a real strength of enhancing a managed service for customers is being able to put those two things together and have this accelerated context. And I think you absolutely have to have a strategy for voice now. So with that being said, it's there is another challenge. It's like, okay, we've got legacy telephony out there, right? Or something like that. Or how do we do this quickly because AI is moving rapidly? People don't want to rip out and replace it necessarily. They don't have time for 9 month to a year project for telephony. They don't want to have to retrain all their agents, and they don't want to create a new silo, right? And so these are some of the key challenges that you're seeing in this space. And being able to accelerate and get to value quickly is so important. And Guillaume, I'm going to let you tell them how you traditionally go after that.
Well, it goes to what's on the screen, right? It's everyone can agree on the outcome or the desired outcome. It's how do you get there, right? And when you look at most organizations, many will tell you they have one too many platforms, overlapping capabilities between them, which leads to the long-term issue of swivel chairing between systems, not just at the agent level, even at the administrative one. So how can you sort of reach this end state that yourself and I, Adam, are talking about in a way that doesn't involve re-architecting from scratch, right? And there is a better way, right? Now, what you have on screen is an oversimplification of what and we'll show you how this works in the context of ServiceNow and 3CLogic. But really, at some point, especially given where we are and with the impact of AI, right? You sort of have to rethink the model. If there was ever an opportunity to sort of take a step back and say, look, it's time to clean out the garage, right? As it pertains to my tech stack. And then what are the pieces that I need to put back together? And what's the order in which I would build them? It would look something like this, right? And we've already hit on the idea and the importance, significance of data and the role it's going to play, right? Context. So really the first step is having that data layer on which you can create that system of action, right? That workflow layer. And once you have those pieces in place, only then can you really then affect the experiences that you want to deliver to the individuals that you serve. Now, those people could be employees, they could be end users and customers. And then, of course, you want that feedback loop, right? When it comes to analytics, that, those insights. So you were talking about when a conversation has occurred, whether it's during or after, how can that rich context come back into that data layer to then feed better experiences after the fact? So what does that look like? Well, if we put it in the context of what we're talking about, and we start talking about configuration versus customization, it looks a little bit like this, right? Those first two layers, right? Data and workflow, that system of record is ServiceNow, right? You build on that foundation. So single data model, it could be sourcing information from different places, and Adam, you can speak to that a little bit, but only when you have that in place can you then build the different types of workflows that align to your business. Now, again, we talked about moving away from generalists to industry specific specialists, right? So I know within the ServiceNow platform there are different products that are healthcare specific, financial specific, managed services, and so forth, that are architected in such a way that they are specific to that industry, right? They recognize the nuances of those different requirements across those different industries. When you've perfected that or put that in place, and that's where, of course, Adam and his team at Glidefast can certainly help, then you can worry about that experience layer. Now, ServiceNow already has native digital channels, and I'm not here to poo-poo digital channels. I think they absolutely play a role, whether it's the knowledge base, a chat, or a chat bot. But when it comes to those white glove or time sensitive, whatever the case may be, use cases where voice comes into play, that's where your traditional contact center can really be woven in and be complementary to everything you're foundationally building on ServiceNow. And that's your voice AI agents, whether it's to help with the experience and intake, all the way through to call deflection, all the way through, of course, to how do you optimize those calls that do get escalated to a live agent that need that human, additional asset. And then all that feeds back into insights. How can those experiences, whether it's digital voice, feed into ServiceNow's analytics, dashboarding, workforce optimization, and all that, of course, then becomes a self-fulfilling set of use cases. So voice AI, for example, can use ServiceNow for context, right? So you have voice AI agents that manage the experience, but have all the data and intelligence in ServiceNow to make it personal. You've got agents in ServiceNow with voice AI agents that can trigger ServiceNow agentic workflows, right? So that's the handshake between systems that can create those automated experiences. Real-time transcription, right? To help the agent understand what's going on, what happened during that virtual experience, what have I now been have at what's been escalated to me, and can I get the context so that I can carry that conversation forward without having to start from scratch, right? So improving the customer experience so you don't feel like you're getting bounced around from individual to individual. How do you automate the manual work that live agents have to do, right? We talked about summarizations of notes. So taking the call transcript and using ServiceNow AI to do the summarization, right? Again, another example of how these two systems can really coexist. And then we talked about the analytics. So this is sort of the idea, sort of the ideal makeup of what you'd want to aim for, Adam. But of course, I'm sure our audience is going, okay, well, that sounds amazing, but what is the path towards actually getting to this type of an outcome, right? What's the lift? What does fast look like if we were to implement this? Adam?
So obviously, it only takes 3 steps to get there. Uh, but no, in reality, and this is like we evaluated a lot of technologies, and we're going to get into our use case in a little bit. But one of the big evaluation factors was this first point here is how cleanly does it tie into the system that you're running today to support your business? And that was a major factor because if not, as we talked about, you can create a silo very easily, or you can have an extreme overlap of identical features in two different platforms that are not really value add, right? And then you also have ongoing maintenance and support with tying those things together. So looking at it this way, this is where we really were looking at, hey, what fits in so cleanly, so tightly with ServiceNow that it's just going to be easier to turn on and move quickly, right? And then that takes you into that next step, right, of actually implementing it. And there's a lot of synergy between ServiceNow and 3CLogic because it was very easy to set up things like an agent workspace and the workflows and administrate all the things that we wanted to change along the way and being ready for AI and testing that to see what the impact would be, right? And so your time to value is much faster. I promise I'll tell you how fast we went with some of this in just a little bit. Um, and then the actual deployment. So you've got all of this planning, right? And then actually putting it into practice and then refining it. And that's my big caution to everybody is like, you don't have to eat the entire elephant at the first sitting, right? It's okay to go live with a subset of these features and then grow into them as your team evolves because you want to minimize the change impact on people. But it's there, right? And you can actually just instead of having to configure and build and integrate and do all these things, it's turn on and use is more of the equation when we're talking about fast. And I think that's where you really see the strength of a ServiceNow 3CLogic implementation. Guillaume, you want to talk on our partnership just a little bit?
Yeah, I am going to do that. We did have a question come in, and to our audience,
Mhm.
feel free to add more. But one of the questions, which I think refers to a little bit of what you talked about, as well as what I covered in the previous slide, was, are we talking about changing the live agent, the human aspect, and trading it out for an AI voice agent, right? And what might be
Mhm.
the impact if you're using ServiceNow ITSM? So I'll take a stab at that. No, is the short answer. Voice AI, interestingly enough, when from 3C Logic's perspective, when we look at some of the applications we've seen our customers use it for, interestingly enough, most phase one is not to try and displace live agents. It's trying to actually improve the IVR and the intake experience, right? So instead of having these deterministic, flows, can you have a conversational experience that can quickly gather the context and use that to determine who should I be routing this to? And can I make sure it has all the necessary context, maybe even automate the creation of an incident if you're using ITSM, so that all that is already automated and populated for the recipient, the agent. In other cases, they're using voice AI for after hours, right? So if there are no agents around, can we still make sure that as opposed to leaving a voicemail, there can be a conversational experience that can lead to a more effective outcome and follow up? And then, of course, yes, there are instances where voice AI can play a role in a call deflection, type use case. People that, for your high volume, low complexity type use cases, a password reset, request or reset might come into play. Getting the latest update on an incident or a case. Does that really necessitate a live individual, or can that be automated using voice AI, but in a way that is now, a more pleasant and more effective experience for the recipients coming in? I don't know if there's anything you'd add there.
The only thing I would add with that is, and I agree with you, not really replacing the people unless there's like a really strong use case to just resolve things instantaneously. Is the way that I always look at AI is it can take your standard person working in a call center or working at tier one and make them hyper smart potentially, right? Or it can make the transaction in our use case where we're actually trying to support platforms and therefore getting from a triage scenario into platform support with a specialist. We want to get to the speed of that because we have some strong SLAs that we have to adhere to in that scenario. And so we want to actually do those things as quickly as possible and as cleanly as possible. Right. And AI can actually help enable that. And it's not that we always just want to skip the triage because sometimes people do need to talk to somebody to like work some things out. But the capture and the transfer of that is much more streamlined.
Yeah. So when we talk about the partnership, and I still see some questions come in, and I promise to field them. Well, look, the reality is, we're talking about two different areas of expertise. One that deals specifically in architecture, in configuration, in ServiceNow, and that's of course where Adam and his team specialize in, and they are also the use case that we're going to be talking about. So they are eating their own dog food, if you will. And then
We
there's
drink champagne.
you
We
drink
drink our own
champagne. I'm
champagne.
sorry, you drink champagne. Better use case, better metaphor. And then you got ourselves here at 3CLogic, where we are really specializing in that engagement layer, which is all things voice, contact center. And I use voice generically here. It could be voice AI, or it could just be voice, in the more traditional sense in terms of getting you to someone. But the idea is, how can you bring these two together to really create an accelerated architectural alignment, where really the outcome becomes a single stack solution, very similar, if not exactly similar, to the one I alluded to before, where each platform is playing to its strengths and it becomes this 1+1 = 3 type scenario, right? Versus traditionally, when you look at most CRM and CCaaS relationships, there's a lot of friction between those platforms because there's a lot of overlap in terms of the features that they traditionally bring to bear. And because of that friction in those traditional models, customers are the ones that are sort of swivel chairing and trying to make up for the lack of cohesion between them. That is something that ourselves and Glidefast have solved for. And I think you're going to speak to this, Adam. The impact, it hits on a number of different areas.
Yeah, this was actually a major part of our evaluation was what's the impact, what's the value to the business, right? And so we had to look at these things as we're making our decision on what technologies do we need to put together to actually have a more effective, a more forward-thinking MSP, right? And so if you can impact financially things like lowering your integration and ongoing maintenance costs, right? If you can do things to get faster return on value because you've stood things up faster and you can actually take advantage of elevated features in a more ready fashion without having to do all this configuration and testing, whatever, to launch it, then that is extremely important to getting to the bottom line. Strategically, having an AI first architecture is incredibly important, right? You want to make sure that that is tightly wound together, which it is in this use case, right? And we wanted to take advantage of that. And again, when it comes to upgrades, we don't want to have all this legacy cost, and we don't want to have technical debt, right? So working in the same way within the same platform with this tight configuration makes that possible, and that actually impacts what you're doing with operations, right? It's all a single painted glass, and I know everybody wants to say that, and like all these others are, but there are a lot of swivel share scenarios out there with some of these other technologies where part of it is and part of it isn't, or some of the reporting is, or some of the reporting isn't, and you can actually have it all there together. And so that was a big factor for making that choice, and that's going to impact us long term, right? And that's also going to impact how we can leverage AI in both platforms, right? And actually reduce some of those metrics that are really important, right? So that's where we get to our impact and value from this kind of synergy.
And if our audience hasn't caught on to it yet, Adam, I mean, Glidefast, although everyone knows you as an elite ServiceNow partner, right? You specialize in the assessment, architectural design, and implementation of the ServiceNow platform, but you have your own managed services offering as well. And you are a consumer yourselves of ServiceNow, and of course, on today's topic, 3CLogic. So walk us through that use case.
Yeah. So our parent company is Apex System, which actually is being rebranded and renamed into Everforth. So I'll just mention that in case that changes when somebody watches this again. But what we were looking at doing is building a more intelligent managed service. Because where we've made investments is in really strong nuanced consulting, right? And so we're very specific to platforms. So beyond, so we're focused on ServiceNow, but other aspects of the business are focused on Salesforce or focused on Workday or focused on Infor or focused on Amazon, right? And so we wanted to make sure that we were building something that would work across all of these major platforms. And we've actually started calling this the EverHub, which is what we're doing with that. And so we're taking a strategic approach to managing all these really key enterprise platforms. And to do that, we had to solve what you're seeing here on the screen, right? Way to think about, let's not have latency between what we're doing with voice and what we're doing with our support platforms. Let's not create too much technical debt and have to manage too many different systems. Let's figure out a way to get the most out of our AI because we're investing in that in several different areas, right? And honestly, being able to accelerate and scale, that's going to be critically important as we grow this business and as we get into new areas or potentially new platforms down the way, right? And so those were the things that we had to really think about strategically before we made that decision. And some of the outputs for us are going to be, hey, we have accelerated triage, which I had already alluded to. We can better handle T1 scenarios and get them to the right group so that they can get resolved much more rapidly. We can work on our call time. We can work on our automation. We can leverage tools within ServiceNow or within 3CLogic or both at the same time, right? We can do a lot of different things there. We've unified our channels, right? And so that was very clean for us. We needed certain capabilities that we wanted to have. And so now we have that and it's built into what we're building, what we have today and what we will continue to expand on in the future. And of course, data, which is what G said up front, that's something else we want to focus on. We're going to have all this inbound data, and that's just going to make us better in the long term.
That's a good story, Adam. We had a quick question come in regarding, AI voice and so forth, and sort of one of the connection points to ServiceNow, which is, do the AI voice agents have the ability to leverage ServiceNow knowledge base, right, to, help manage the conversation? The short answer to that is yes. And then from there, of course, ideally, trigger an action that ServiceNow, of course, would manage and automate. So yes, that is just one of the many use cases that we can together with Glidefast explore. And it's actually a great segue in terms of, all right, well, what are some of the key takeaways? All right, we promised we'd keep this session to about 30 minutes or so, where we are men of our word, if you will. But if you were to walk away with anything, what are some of the things that we want to make sure you take with you? Well, step one is, if there was ever a time to unify things, and right now we're talking about harnessing and unifying your context, right? We talked about data silos. The reality is that one of the things that has always made it hard to deliver, meaningful and memorable and operationally efficient customer experiences has been the fact that there's too many platforms, too much data, and too many different places. And really, it's been human middleware that's been sort of being the glue that's made all this stuff work up until now, but not to the level of efficiency that you would want, certainly in a managed services model. So if there was ever an opportunity to take a look at how you can harness and unify your context, not just your digital context that's hosted in ServiceNow, but the experiential ones that might be harnessed in a system like that of 3CLogic, this is a great opportune time to do that, especially given AI and its dependency on data. Then, you also want to make sure that you closely evaluate your ROI on all your ongoing, ROI, costs for when it comes to scaling the solution around and AI, right? You don't want AI to be a runaway train. We've already seen, I think, Adam, you can speak this, where, you turn it on, but it's got no guardrails, and it's a blank check without really any real predetermined results or goals to measure against. I don't know if there's something you want to add in regards to point number two in that regard, Adam.
Trustworthy data is critical, right? And I think this is where instead of SaaS apocalypse, which is everybody was talking about, I think actually having trusted data and trusted sources is so important right now when it comes to scaling AI, because yeah, you can build anything and it's really awesome. It's a fun time, right? But it's kind of the Wild West. And at the end of the day, we still need some structure around all of that, and we need to be secure too.
Right. So in other words, just because you can build it, right, doesn't mean you should. And if you do, make sure you have a purpose in mind and a way to measure whether or not it was worth the effort, right? And last but not least, perhaps I would argue the most important point, which is, this is the opportunity to make this strategic shift in how you approach, customer experience or employee experience internally. I've been known to say that if you're looking at contact centers, your contact center operations today, and you're thinking about replacing your contact center platform, this is a great time to make sure that you don't just replace a contact center solution with another contact center solution. That act in of itself is not transformational. No different than replacing your CRM with another CRM-like solutioning, right? It is an opportunity to take a step back and understand that the two are complementary, two sides of the same coin, if that coin is CX. And so this is an opportunity to take a strategic look at how you can unify the two to really fully monetize the investment in both. And then really, at the end of the day, get the level of operational efficiency, which I know is key to all managed service operations out there, right? To get the most you can out of that investment when it comes to monetization, and also make sure that the impact is as maximized as possible, right? Adam, I don't know if there's anything you want to close out in regards to that point.
Not in that point, but I forgot something. I forgot to say how long it took us to actually do our first iteration release, and I kind of promised that. So apologies. 7 weeks is the answer. And did that mean that we turned on every feature and every function and all the bells and whistles? Absolutely not, because I told you you shouldn't do that, right? But we did stand up and we are live with features of 3CLogic in 7 weeks, right? And we will continue to build on those as we identify the right use cases for automation AI in the future.
All right. So it's not a 1 year program
Nope.
that we live
Nope.
we're living at the rate of AI right now. So a year might as well be a lifetime, right? So you need those quick wins, those quick deployments that can give you that quick return. Well, look, we're coming to the end of today's session, right? If anything that myself or Adam covered is of interest, if you want to explore in more detail how some of the things that we covered might be specifically relevant to your operations, your current or future use of ServiceNow, or perhaps your interest in voice AI and contact center in the context of ServiceNow, then we certainly welcome the opportunity to have a conversation with you. If you want to reach out directly to the 3CLogic team, you can do so at servicenow@3clogic.com. Of course, you can reach out to Adam and his group at info@glidefast.com. I will go ahead and let you all know that if you have every intention of being at the ServiceNow Knowledge 26 event, which will just be in a few 6 or 7 weeks from now, both of our teams will also be on hand, and we welcome the opportunity to meet with you and your teams in person. With that being said, Adam, any final words?
Nope. Thank you for the time, Guillaume. This is great. And everybody have a great afternoon.
My pleasure. Well, I echo that to all of you. Please stay tuned for future events. We always welcome your participation. We look forward to seeing you soon. Have a good day.